The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. All right, welcome to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Peter Hostrauser here. I got a great guest today. She is the digital advertising expert, entrepreneur, and consultant. Meredith Kallaher is here. Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here. I love the topic.
Awesome. Yeah. We're going to disrupt some things. We're going to story tell. But first, let's still tell a little bit of your story. Like, who are you and how did you become the digital advertising expert, entrepreneur, and consultant that you are?
So right now I am running an advertising or marketing agency, Meredith Kallaher Marketing, and I offer Facebook and digital ad strategy, mainly Facebook and Instagram strategy and management. I love doing that. I also do love telling stories. So I write conversion copywriting for websites. And we start with always, if a business doesn't have their brand story written, we write out their brand story and then plug and play it wherever we need to. Usually it means website copy, but it could be an email series. So that's what I'm doing now. But I've been working for, 24 years. But when I graduated from the University of Mississippi with an accounting degree, and I have my career has had a lot of twists and turns. But I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers right out of school for 6 years, and honestly did not enjoy working there. But I mean, a lot of that was on me and mindset tricks I learned later, or techniques maybe. And then when I left Pricewaterhouse, I really started pursuing I became an entrepreneur and started again different businesses and learned a lot and took a few years off and just worked in the house with my 3 kids who are now teenagers. And but so I've done different things and that's led me here to my own.
That's funny. I have a friend who is an Ole Miss grad and also an accountant. Must have a great accounting school there.
We do have a really good accounting school. Yeah.
Well, let's unpack a little bit, even before college. What led you into what was your path going into accounting? Was there in your bio, it's like you really love data and checking numbers and such, and we'll get into that and how you connected that. But let's unpack that a little bit. What kind of student were you? What were you like in high school and even in the college?
Honestly, really, and I think maybe the first 35 years of my life, I just followed fun, and I really thought numbers were fun, and I kind of like competing in school. So I was a really good student. I was in the top 10 of my class in my big public high school in Mississippi, but I was motivated by when they announced the class rank in 9th grade. I was motivated by winning, basically, And I started as a math major at University of Mississippi, and I got into Cal, and I hired a tutor, which I love tutors, so that's good. I realized I was making A's, but I didn't understand it. It sort of got out of and it wasn't that fun anymore because I didn't understand it. So I switched to accounting, honestly, because I could kill it. I was good at it, and I could go have fun because Ole Miss is a lot of fun. I go to all the football games and still have A's, which isn't always, it took me a while I did learn from them that just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. And I think that I hope that I can teach my kids that. They're 17, 15, and 13. So I have a starting senior who he says Ole Miss is his first choice too. And we're in Miami, so there's not that many other kids from Miami, Florida going there. But so I think it's fine that I think it's great to follow what you enjoy and follow your passion. But I was pretty unhappy for 6 years working at Pricewaterhouse. And if I had stopped to think like, what is the job going to be like? Like, okay, I'm good at this accounting stuff, but what is an auditor at a big six accounting firm actually do? And what I figured out is they don't do much with numbers. I mean, auditing is like the people that make a lot of money in accounting aren't the people doing the debits and credits, which I thought was fun. Like it's compliance. It's more like nitty gritty, like what I found super boring. A lot more like following rules, which, so that's my.
Yeah, you know what I love about that is you started with it's been all over the place. And I think that's the biggest misconception in education, right? Like most people think, all right, I'm going to go here and then I'm going to go here and then I'm going to go into my career and that's it. And those days are over. I think for the most part, unless you're really lucky and you just hit the winning piece there. And I really love the fact that you were starting to look into what you leaned into your fun, right? And then this is what I thought was, and then it wasn't, and then you started to take a look at storytelling and helping others. Now, one of the interesting things that you do is understanding, like you ran into the Art of Paid Traffic by Rick Mulready, I believe his name is, and that was the click. Unpack that a little bit. How did that story unfold? And then you were like, you know what, I'm going into this.
Well, I kept following fun. I realized, especially thinking about for your podcast, when I left Price Waterhouse and was like, what do I want to do now? Well, owning my own business sounds fun. And I realized I have a creative piece. So really for a while, I just kept doing what I thought was fun. And that's great, you guys. I do recommend that because that keeps you interested. And like, it's awesome if you can get paid to do something you love. But one thing I started to realize, before I started my own business, I owned a franchise, which was still my own business, but I had a magazine for 5 years in Miami, and I advertised for locally owned businesses. And I learned a lot about social media for those businesses and creating beautiful ads for those local businesses, because it was like this beautiful high-end sort of book. And I learned how to tell a story because that's what we did in our ads. But what I think starting to listen to Rick Mulready's podcast, and I realized I never asked my participants or the people that I wanted to help, what help do you want? Like, how could I help you? Because I started to see as I was selling that book, the ads in that book, Miami, the local businesses here in Miami, they didn't really want that. I mean, they spend a lot of money on rent. Like, it's expensive to operate a small business in Miami. And so they really didn't need an expensive advertising piece. So it was sort of, I was starting to realize that I hadn't asked businesses what they really wanted. At the same time that I heard Rick say on the Facebook and Instagram ads, this is what he said, are all about numbers. And when it clicked, it seems so silly, but I went, I'm good at numbers. And what I already knew about social media, it's also got that creative piece that I had been learning through action with that franchise I owned. And so I looked around and I realized that there were a lot of local businesses that actually did want paid traffic advertising and didn't know how to do it. And so I went and I listened to a lot of free podcasts, which and I don't know if everybody can learn from podcasts, but I'm a really good listener. I do realize that about me. I'm kind of an auditory learner. So I was able to drive around Miami. I felt like I circled selling my advertising, listen to podcasts, and I learned so much from Amy Porterfield and from Rick Mulready. Amy's podcast is The Art of Online Business. And then I was able to go buy a few digital courses and learn, I got certified, which I don't think you really need actually, but digital marketers gave me a certification in Facebook and Instagram ads. But after I took that course, I actually was like, I don't quite know everything I want to know. So I went and bought another class that taught me how to run a Facebook ad business. The first class taught me how to run Facebook ads, but then the next class taught me how to run the business that runs Facebook ads. Yeah. And so, and here I am, and I was able to, it's taken off so fast because of the marriage of finding what people wanted, and then going to learn how to do that thing, and then just serving it to them. It's been really fun.
There are so many things. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think one of the things that I've realized listening to your story is you're very self-aware. You understand, like, okay, I'm a competitor.
Yeah,
I love to win. I love numbers. I love to have fun, and I'm an auditory learner.
yeah.
Super understanding of who you are and what you are and what you want to do, or an area that you want to go, which is amazing. So let's transfer a little bit into kind of the disrupt education question.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a little bit about like ed tech and different things like this. But my first question is, okay, so we both have teenagers. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, so very close on your second two. What advice do you give your kids going into education and the high school, the next level? What advice do you give them?
Well, all sorts of advice, but sometimes I'm starting to realize that sometimes they're not ready to hear like all our life lessons that we've learned at 47, and I want so badly for them maybe not to go through some of the pangs I went through to learn them, but sometimes when you're 17 or 15, you're not quite ready to hear everything. But I think that the big one for me is, well, two things I tell them. Like, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's what you should do. That I really, think about, because that's not something that I've ever done, is to think like what the ramifications, really just think way far in advance. So anyway, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that's something you should do. And education is a good thing. I mean, my husband and I talk about this. We have a friend that we know of, a couple here in Miami that are very highly educated, and they have a son that's very interested in mechanics and putting things together. He, from a young age, IKEA's hired him, IKEA, to put together like huge IKEA things, but for not just what you put in people's houses, like for events that somebody might. And he's been doing that since he was like 13 or 14. Well, he's choosing not to go to college because he wants to pursue his technical career. And truthfully, if some of the kids that do go to college in his specific industry, I'm not sure what he would define it as, they get behind the kids that don't go, because they wait 4 years to start their career, and then the people that started right out of high school have 4 years on them. Okay, but if you don't know exactly what you want to do, like this child, like my 17-year-old, it happened to me, then education is a really good thing. And I think that, keep learning. In fact, my grandmother said that to me. I hadn't thought about that till just now, but, keep learning and if you have that luxury, then don't, just, I guess, so just because you don't know the end goal, like what you learn is super helpful. Even for me, like, even though I was having fun and I did accounting, and maybe if I thought through, I would have picked a different major. But in the end, everything I learned in those accounting courses at Ole Miss and then at Pricewaterhouse I'm totally using now. So
Right. Yeah. I love those two things. Education is just, if you can fit it in, which you can, and systemically or not, but you keep using those things if you're looking for those things. I actually found myself what I kind of love to do, but I didn't know it until later. So we have very similar stories there in college. And also, yeah, I love that. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that should be the thing that you do. There's so many different opportunities there. Love that advice. I think I'm going to talk to my son tonight about that. Let's unpack a little bit about two things. So I teach an entrepreneurship class. We have a lot of kids who think they want to be entrepreneurs, but then, we know this is a tough gig. I mean, I can imagine. I was in advertising years ago, running a magazine on your own, and that's got to be tough. But, a lot of students will say, "Oh, we'll just advertise on Facebook or and everybody will come to me," right? Which is the biggest misconception. And then we have these ed tech companies. A lot of great ed tech companies are evolving, but the story is muddled. So I wanted to kind of lean on you here a little bit and say, okay, you're the expert here. Number one, what do you tell a young person who thinks they have a business idea? First, we'll start there. And then the second follow-up question is, there's so many ed tech companies. How do they differentiate themselves, or what are some advice that you would have for them? So let's start with the young kid who's like, yeah.
The first thing that I would tell people is that marketing is super important. You can't just create a business and expect, we can't build it and they will come. Like, that does not happen, right? So you have to invest in marketing, telling people about your business, right? But it doesn't have to be money. It can be time or money. And so when you mentioned, like, some people think, oh, I just advertise on social media. So I call it organic social, when you're not paying for ads, but you have an Instagram or Facebook or Twitter account for your business, right? And you're posting to it. To successfully gain customers through organic social media takes a lot of time. If you're going to, or money, because you could pay someone to do it for you, but you can't just haphazard. You have to have a strategy. You have to figure out the strategy. And luckily, there's a lot of great people out there that give away free strategies. For anyone, like, I love Tyler J. McCall for Instagram. Jasmine Star gives a ton of free things away. So Rick Mulready, not as much lately, but he has free strategy on his podcast or websites. But yeah, but it takes time, you guys. So that's, first of all, I'd say, when you're starting your business, it's so exciting that you have a great idea. But the first thing that you want to do is, and if I go back to numbers, but and this is a little profit first stuff, but profit says, first, the money you make, you want to be able to put back into your business. So you basically save it pretty much a little bit to put back in your business. The second biggest expense should be marketing. And that could be your social media. It could be, which I always suggest, your time. Like, you need to somehow afford the time to call people and tell them you have a business, or to knock on doors, which is what I did a lot with that magazine. I literally, door to door. So anyway, yeah. So I just want you to remember that came up because of young people thinking they could just, advertise on social media. Yes, you can do that for sure. But if you don't have money to spend, which a lot of us don't when we're starting, then you got to carve out a chunk of time. And then, when you do have a few sales, like maybe from door to door or from emailing or calling, because, by the way, I don't think you have to. Like, a lot of people also think they have to have social media, and that's not always the case. I mean, because it takes a lot of time. So in fact, unless you're going to carve out the time, I don't suggest, trying to get clients that way. But then you can do what I love, is the paid ads as well. And once you have a proven offer, they work great to find a lot of customers fast.
You build strategies, and from some of the people who've said some things, and obviously another skill set that I'm a great listener, and then asking the client what you want. That's great. I love that so much, because it's so true. I mean, I'm thinking about now, I need to ask my students in entrepreneurship class, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? So, what are maybe like one or two hints that, Meredith can do this, or this is a suggestion that you have for an ed tech company evolving into this really rapid market that is blowing up?
So this is my advice. Create a course. And sometimes, if you're a daredevil, you don't even have to create the whole course. Maybe even the first module, or sometimes even the outline if you're really brave, which I say Rick Mulready suggests this, actually. Just don't even create the whole thing. The bones of it. Go to 20 people. Do not try to run out. And it's so frustrating because you want to get out there quickly and you just know you're right. But just prove it to yourself. Don't make calls, email people. You run organic social. And what's cool about digital ads is once you have proof of concept and we see who, or you see who you're selling your course to, then, and then we're talking Facebook and Instagram, but any Google too, at all the platforms, YouTube, then the demographic targeting is so cool with Facebook and Instagram, and that you can go find 100,000 people that are just very similar to the 20 that actually bought your course. And you can start using the language that was working. But if we're going to use ads to find those first 20 people, we have to spend money on testing all those different audiences. And we still test a little bit because it's so cool. I mean, there's so much detailed targeting and it's very nuanced, but you waste a lot of money in the testing on ads.
You know, a lot of young people and actually entrepreneurs in general, when they start, I'm going to sell to everybody, right? And even like with students, when they're like selling their own skills, they're like, I want all the skills. So no, it's okay not to be good at things and to understand like what you are good at. So unpacking that is wonderful. I want to give the listeners a chance to connect with you and your services. Should they be running those betas and they understand they have their first 20 customers down, which I know a lot of ed tech companies are in this space. And also, you know, you can help individuals understand, you know, as themselves as a business, if they're you know, maybe copywriting, like you said, or those types of things as well. How can people connect with Meredith?
First off, let me mention that if you are an ed tech, have an ed tech company, or you have any business and you do have a proof of concept and you're ready to explode your reach, that's what I like to say, that I help people expand their reach and explode their sales. But you might be ready for Facebook and Instagram ads or digital ad strategy, and maybe you want to do it yourself, which is great. There is a lot of, I mean, they're very I had to go take some classes to learn a lot of the nuances, but I did prepare for your listeners a cheat sheet, because we didn't mention this yet, but if people are in the Facebook world, they might know that Apple released a new update, iOS 14, and it was iOS 14.6 that it came out, rolling out in April. And I think, and what it did, Apple's way of, they really listen to their customers, and they have enforced this privacy. So Apple is giving all its users the option of opting out of tracking. So that has changed Facebook and Instagram ads. It's going to change Google ads too, because it really relied on the track. Facebook it's gone through huge changes. First, they fought it they knew this was coming, and they spent over $1 billion to try to get Apple not to make that change. Well, they lost, and so they've implemented all these changes, and it's made running Facebook ads a little bit harder, only because there are so many new things. If you've done it before, you guys, there's a lot of different things you have to do now to be in advance with Facebook new rules. And so I boiled it down 8 things that you need to make sure to do in your Facebook ad strategy to get it to even work right now. And so I put that in a cheat sheet, meredithkallaher.com/disrupt. And people can go download that, which would be helpful if they're running their own ads. And so iOS 14 Facebook ad cheat sheet. But also on my website, meredithkallaher.com, there's a Let's Talk button all over the website. And I'd love to hear about your business. And we just have a free discovery call. You can book a time that works for you. And I'd love to run your Facebook ads for you. We could also do a day where we planned your strategy, and then I get in your Facebook ads manager, and then you run the ads yourself, which is actually a great way to learn them quickly, is have me set it up for you, and then you do it. And then I also do this conversion copywriting, where we create your brand story, and then we plug it in. And I just started blogging again, because I do like to write. And so if you come to the website and you download that freebie, or you just my email list, weekly, I'm sharing what I did when I started this new marketing agency, step by step. And step number 1 was write my brand story. So you could, instead of me doing it for you, you could learn the resources I use by just following along with my newsletter and blog.
Oh, that's awesome. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well for our listeners. I'm going to, like any kid who's asking me about copywriting, marketing, or anything, I'm going to send them there, because reading your story, your classes are out, or coming out and those things, and then understanding you have a wonderful story. And it is awesome to hear from a professional who started down one path and then shifted and understood. A lot of self-awareness. Meredith, thank you so much for sharing your story on this podcast of Disrupt Education.
And Peter, thank you for everything that you do. I think it's I just wound my way to where I am today by which is failing forward and figuring out what worked and failing again, and using educational tools like technical classes. But I feel like it's great that you are sort of looking at it from a bird's eye view and helping young people and entrepreneurs find the education that works best for them. So maybe they don't have to make as many mistakes as I did. I think that's awesome. So thank you for what you're doing.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's fail fast and hopefully less. Learn from our failures, right? The youth.
That's right.
So, well, again, we'll pass all your information up. Thank you so much. It is Meredith Kallaher.com, right? And then that's pretty much everybody there, everything there. Click that Let's Talk. You are very approachable, and thank you so much. You might be getting some of my students saying, hey, I need to learn a little bit about marketing, but I think it's great. You'll be a great asset to it. And make an Ole Miss proud. So good for you. Awesome. And thank you all, listeners. We appreciate you guys. And if you have any questions or leave some comments, we're right here for you. Till next time, thanks for listening to Disrupt Education.